Hello, this is Hamparian with the Armenian National Committee of America speaking to you today from Washington, D.C. In our national headquarters. I want to share with you that the U.S. Senate is in recess. They are back home in their home states, but they'll be returning next week, early next week, and when they do, they will consider a major piece of legislation. It's called the National Defense Authorization Act. Within that, it's our aim and our hope, our intention, to see the Senate consider three amendments that matter a lot to us as Armenian Americans. Three amendments that speak to the security, the survival of Artsakh and Armenia. Very, very important initiatives. I want to share with you a legislative brief, which you can find online. It's actually the link, that's the title of this website, the link that's the title of this Facebook post, this Facebook video, is in fact the link to the ANCA legislative brief. And you can follow it there. It's about 2.5, 3 pages long. And for those of you who would like to just track it in text online, and please do so. For those of you who enjoy listening and absorbing information, through video or through audio, maybe you can listen while you're, as a podcast when you're driving. Maybe you can, while you're exercising, doing the dishes, whatever it is. For those of you who like to, get your info through video and audio, though, this is for you. So let me walk through this for you. The legislative brief is about the pro-accountability amendments, all three of them, to the FY, fiscal year 2002, National Defense Authorization Act. The issue, right, and I think with the legislative brief, you want to define the issue that will be decided favorably or unfavorably. One way or the other, the U.S. Senate will decide on this issue, and that may be through action, it may be through inaction, it may be through sort of a proactive approach, or it may be through, by just not addressing it in a meaningful fashion. But the issue is this, and I'll read it. The U.S. Senate should adopt amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act holding Azerbaijan accountable for its war crimes and stopping the flow of U.S. foreign assistance, including military aid, to its corrupt, oil-rich, and aggressively anti-Armenian Aliyev regime. So will the Senate hold Azerbaijan accountable, or will it not? We saw in the House that there were a number of amendments that did hold Azerbaijan accountable. We want the Senate counterpart to the House measure, to include accountability measures as well, in the expectation that when the two pieces of legislation are reconciled through a committee process or some other process, that the version that gets enacted into law holds Azerbaijan, also Turkey, accountable. That's the issue at stake. Let me dive now into the legislative history, and some of this is known to you, other parts of it may not be. Section 907, which is really the heart, I think, of these three amendments. Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, a large bill written back in the 90s, was enacted in 1992, and it bans most forms of assistance to the government of Azerbaijan until it takes demonstrable steps. Those are the words in the legislation, demonstrable steps to cease all blockades and other offensive uses of force against both Armenia and Artsakh, called Nagorno-Karabakh in the legislation. That's the legislative history. Now, on the executive side, we've seen some developments on this front, and on the legislative side, and I'll walk through what's happened since the adoption of this, since the enactment of Section 907. Well, we know that White Houses, both Democrat and Republican, have essentially allocated over $120 million in military aid to Azerbaijan by waiving this provision of law. So this is the law. Was enacted in 1992. In 2001, the president was given broader authority to waive the enforcement of Section 907, and every president since has done that. And they have provided assistance through the foreign military financing, international military education and training, and also something called the Section 333 capacity building program. So $120 million has gone to Azerbaijan because presidents since 2001 have waived this law, have signed exemption that says we will not enforce this law because we consider it good for America, or we consider that the provisions of the law have been met. In some formulation, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden have waived this law. Now, what makes President Biden's waiver more significant, or more urgent certainly, is that it was waived, that he exercised his waiver after Azerbaijan attacked Artsakh, after Azerbaijan ethnically cleansed over 100,000 Armenians from their indigenous homes, after Azerbaijan killed over 5,000 Armenians deployed white phosphorus and cluster bombs, illegal munitions, deployed Turkish-supplied Syrian mercenaries and jihadists, used Turkish Bayraktar drones that contained U.S. parts. In the wake of all of these violations, knowing full well that Azerbaijan used every asset at its command, including units that were trained by U.S. military assistance, even in the knowledge of that, of how Azerbaijan used U.S. assistance, he still exercised the waiver, which I think is more egregious and frankly, a higher order offense or outrage against peace, and it's deeply, deeply, deeply troubling. More so when you consider that President Biden, when he was a candidate, called upon his predecessor, Donald Trump, to enforce Section 907. So as a candidate, he saw the wisdom in enforcing Section 907 during the war itself and said, Donald Trump, President Trump needs to enforce this law. When he becomes president, he waives this law. That's a 180-degree reversal on a position he adopted during the campaign. And he made the decision, as I mentioned, in the knowledge of Azerbaijan's aggression, war crimes, and ethnic cleansing. So that is the executive branch record on this issue. Legislatively, we've seen some progress on limiting aid to Azerbaijan. Of course, on July 28th of this year, we saw the foreign aid bill include the Pallone Amendment, which restricted two streams of assistance, the foreign military financing and the international military education and training. And that was a welcome move by Congressman Pallone and all his colleagues who supported that. A couple months later, on September 23rd, we saw a range of amendments get adopted, not to the foreign aid bill, but to the National Defense Authorization Act on the House side. And that was requiring a report on the abuse of U.S. military aid by units that get U.S. military aid, including those in Azerbaijan. Reporting requirements on Azerbaijan's use of cluster bombs and white phosphorus, other prohibited munitions, a report on Turkey's deployment of jihadist mercenaries on behalf of Azerbaijan's war on Artsakh, and also the presence of U.S. Parts and technology in the Turkish drones that Azerbaijan used to kill so many Armenians. So we were encouraged by that set of amendments. Those amendments also included calls for the release of Armenian prisoners of war, which are being illegally held and certainly illegally abused by the government of Azerbaijan to this day, with little protest from Washington. In fact, Washington has used the formula of all sides should release all prisoners, when they know very well, perhaps better than anyone else, that it is Azerbaijan alone that holds prisoners. It is Azerbaijan alone that is torturing and abusing them. Armenia returned all prisoners of war upon the cessation of hostilities, which is an international legal requirement. Azerbaijan did not do so, held them as leverage, held them as bargaining chips, held them as hostages, and now is being rewarded by the U.S. State Department, which just offers generic calls on all sides. So it basically shows that when Azerbaijan can be the sole party, the unilateral violator of a humanitarian principle or an international treaty, right? But nonetheless, both parties get called upon to cease that activity, the activity that it's only Azerbaijan undertaking. So it's again, these are things that are so patently and obviously unfair that, I think 4th and 5th graders could readily understand, maybe even 4 and 5-year-olds could readily understand that blaming both parties for the sins of one party is wrong, it's inaccurate, it is unfair to the party that's not doing the wrong, and it is emboldening the party that does do wrong. Again, these are like very simple principles. When our Department of State, our White House, our National Security Council make statements like these, they know exactly what they're doing. Now, we could, out of a sort of a sense of politeness or etiquette, just give folks a free pass for lies like this that they tell to our faces. But the stakes are far too high for that. The stakes are far too high. The time is long since gone when we can just, turn a blind eye to the lies being told to our face. The same State Department, the same foreign policy establishment that lied to our faces for a century, not a year, not a decade, for a century about the Armenian genocide, are now lying to us about Azerbaijan's aggression against Armenia and Artsakh. To be clear, they lied to us for a century about the Armenian genocide. And mark my words, they would be lying about it still until this very day, if not for your advocacy, your devotion, your commitment to the truth. We turned the tide, brought America to the right side of this issue, kicking and screaming, got 49 US states to recognize this crime, got the House to recognize it through a resolution adopted 405 to 11, got the US Senate to pass it unanimously without one dissenting voice, placing the administration in a position where it simply had no choice but to accept the truth. President Biden did so on April 24th. Of course, on the 23rd, he green-lighted US assistance to Azerbaijan, a country hell-bent on completing that crime. And now we have a State Department which is, I guess at the most technical level, on board the recognition of the Armenian genocide. But ask yourself, how often have you heard the State Department use the phrase Armenian genocide? Since April 24th, count the days from then until now, count how many times that word has been uttered, that phrase has been uttered. Maybe on one hand you could count it. Why? Because they're still in denial. They're still in denial. The political leadership of our country, under pressure from the population of our country, did the right thing, but the same establishment that came kicking and screaming into the recognition realm is now, in full denial when it comes to Azerbaijan's aggression against the Armenians. They'll dumb it down, they'll distract from it, they'll talk about both sides when they know very well that it is Azerbaijan committing the acts of aggression, that ethnically cleansed Artsakh, that is today invading and occupying Armenian territory. The claim that they simply don't know is so utterly laughable. Think about this. Your tax dollars, a good chunk of your tax dollars, are devoted to our intelligence budget, to the intelligence community, which receives in excess of $100 billion a year to know what's going on in the world. The proposition that the US government does not know who is initiating aggression it's an insult for us to have to hear something like that. And it should be an insult for people to say things quite so stupid as that. I mean, people on the American payroll, you would have a higher expectation that they would, if they're going to lie, they should at least lie in something more than an elementary school manner by saying, well, we just don't know. We have no idea. We have no idea. We don't hear the words uttered by Aliyev, right? He says he's going to attack and take East Zangezur, which is the Sunni part of Armenia. He claims that Yerevan is the Erivan Khahanate, which is his territory, which he will one day reclaim. So the U.S. intelligence apparently unable to track the Azeri media, the public statements of the Azeri president, unable to catch that, they let that one go. The satellites apparently don't cover the Caucasus, where they see every detail of troop movement, every detail of cross-border aggression through, whether it's our technical capabilities are more than sufficient to track Azerbaijan's movements and actions and aggression against Armenia. Of course, the human sources in the region are robust. They're highly funded, deeply embedded. Those folks as well know very well who's doing the aggression. And yet we get the line, we just don't know. Reject that, because you know what? People who respect themselves don't allow themselves to be lied to. And you know what? We respect ourselves. And when our government lies to us, we say, you are lying to us, stop that. And when they don't stop, we turn to our Congress and say, set things right. Senator Menendez is doing just that. I'll get to that in a second. Okay. In terms of the remedies, and this is I think we're turning the corner. We're trying to set things right. As we did on the genocide issue, now we must do in checking Azerbaijan's aggression. 3 initiatives, 2 by Senator Menendez, 1 by Senator Padilla. The first, it's amendment number 4177, offered by Chairman Menendez of the Foreign Relations Committee, would stop or prohibit the White House from exercising its waiver authority over Section 907. I think the thought behind it is something like this. Presidents have been given the option to waive this law. They were given the congressional authority to waive this law. They misused that. They abused that authority for many, many years. President Biden did so in the most egregious manner in the wake of Azerbaijan's aggression. So in the wake of Azerbaijan's aggression, the law was yet again waived when the White House knew, by Aliyev's own words, by our own intelligence agencies, that Azerbaijan started this attack and they're continuing this attack. Greenlighting continued military aid to them is an abuse of Section 907. Again, again, clear to a child. So what Senator Menendez is doing is saying, well, the executive branch of our government, as recently as this April 23rd, as I mentioned, as recently as this April, has abused this authority. It's time for Congress to take back that prerogative, to take back that authority, and to reestablish the law, which is Section 907. The law is in place for a reason. It was adopted on a very, very broad-based bipartisan manner back in 1992. It's been the abuse of the law that has led to the failings of U.S. policy. It's time for Congress to reassert its authority. We absolutely and powerfully support the Menendez Amendment. I'll read you a quote that Senator Menendez shared on the subject. He said, as the regime in Baku, with Turkey's support, continues choosing a path of violence instead of a peaceful negotiated process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, it is long past time for this and all future administrations, to halt this type of assistance and fully respect Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act. Amen. Could not say it better. Let me repeat that last part. It is long past time for this and all future administrations to halt this type of assistance and fully respect Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act. He hits the nail on the head. We're fully supportive and very energetically behind the Menendez Amendment number 4177. You can also be supportive by weighing in through anca.org/NDAA, and I encourage you to do so today. There's a second amendment, it's numbered 4150, which deals with Turkey's drone program, and it would demand a report on the presence of U.S. parts in Turkish drones. Now, you know that the Turkish drones, Bayraktar drones in particular, were deployed by Azerbaijan against Artsakh and resulted in a great number of the casualties and deaths and dismemberments that occurred during Azerbaijan's aggression. Senator Menendez is saying, well, we need to get to the bottom of this. What about those U.S. parts? We discovered at least 7 when there was a downed Bayraktar. A couple of them were shot down. They were opened up. There were many parts that were sourced from the U.S. or sourced from firms with U.S. subsidiaries or affiliates. We need answers about those U.S. parts. We need to know what laws were violated. This is, as inconvenient as it might be to the people in the Defense Department and State Department, we are still a country of laws. We are still a nation of laws, and there are laws that govern U.S. Arms exports and the export of U.S. Parts and technology that are weaponized to kill innocent people. And you know what? We deserve answers on that. It's been a year now that this administration, the Trump administration before it, and now the Biden administration, has failed to investigate these drones and these U.S. parts. Senator Menendez would fix that on the House side. It would be the work of Congressman Cardenas and Schiff. We need an investigation. What's the alternative? Think about it, right? The alternative is that American laws can be broken, but because, you know what, it's inconvenient to enforce every single law, that we should just give Azerbaijan a pass. They have oil and Turkey's in NATO, so, what's a law between friends? What's an export violation between friends? You know what? We don't see it that way at all. In fact, we see it just the opposite. We think that there is a rule of law in this country. We are a nation of laws. If laws are broken, people should be held to account. People should be held to account. On the minus side of this, on the negative side of this violation, on the human side of this violation, are many Armenian deaths. Families without fathers, without brothers, without sisters, children who've been orphaned, women who have been widowed. That's the dark side of this violation, right? Is there another side to it? The consequences have been felt by those killed and dismembered, crippled by these violations of law. Is anyone to be held to account? Or is it just that Azerbaijan, has some oil, they can buy off some people, so they get a free pass? Is that the type of nation we are? I don't think so. I think when we press this issue, and ultimately when we prevail on this issue, we will have helped establish the rule of law a little bit deeper here in America and shown not just Azerbaijan, but the world that America cannot be bought off, cannot be silenced. I think that'll be a good thing. Be a good thing for us. I'll be proud of wearing my Armenian hat and my American hat. I'll be proud of having advanced a responsible policy of stewardship of American law. So that's the second Menendez Amendment, number 4150. And the third is by Senator Padilla of California, a great friend at the state level and now at the federal level. He has offered an amendment in response to all of these Azerbaijani violations, in response to the broad-based reporting of Azerbaijan's use of cluster bombs and white phosphorus and other illegal arms, the deployment of Turkish drones with U.S. parts, and of course, Turkey's recruitment of mercenaries into Azerbaijan's aggression against Artsakh. His amendment number, okay, let's see what we have here. 4251, Amendment 4251 to the NDAA would mandate that the State Department and Defense Department issue a report to Congress on each of these three issues: the mercenaries, the drones, and the prohibited munitions. Again, right? If there are violations of law, I think everyone would want to know that. If there are people who would rather that the law not be enforced, or they think that Azerbaijan deserves some special exemption, let them go to the Senate floor and explain that. They can go down and say, you know, we have laws and they apply, you know, across the board, except when I think it's inconvenient, except when, you know, Azerbaijan or Turkey are the ones committing the violations, they should get a free pass. Let them say that. I think that would be an interesting debate to have in the U.S. Senate. And if they're not willing to do that, let's enforce the law. I think that's a fair proposition. When we now get to the point that we need to push this, right? This now comes into our world, right? Which is, what are we going to do about it? How seriously will our senators take these issues? Well, no more seriously than you and I. If we don't take these issues seriously, our legislators cannot read our minds. They will not automatically divine our hopes and aspirations for Armenia. They will know when they hear from you. They will take it seriously when you take it seriously. When it is a high priority for you and you are insistent and persistent in raising this issue, they in turn will be insistent and persistent in pressing this with their Senate leadership and ultimately with the White House. That is how our democracy works. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. The well-intentioned but quiet character who just hopes that the system will produce the right outcomes, they don't get much at all, right? So get out of the stands, get onto the field, into the arena, and help advance these issues. There are some points I can review now. I'll review them, some of the talking points you might want to raise if you find yourself in a conversation on the subject. More often than not, you'll just send an email by going to anca.org/NDAA. You might make a phone call, which is usually a quick phone call with a receptionist. But to the extent that you want to understand the argumentation, let me run through some of the talking points that might be helpful. Number one, now more than ever, Congress must act in a bipartisan manner to enforce Section 907 and stop subsidizing Azerbaijan's relentless aggression against Armenians. The point here is that this aggression is, in one way, in a very meaningful way, Azerbaijan's aggression. But it's also, and I say this with great sadness, in part American aggression, because we have funded the Azerbaijani military. We have given them resources, we have given them capabilities. Frankly, we have given them moral support, and we have emboldened them by funneling U.S. military aid to them, even as they commit these crimes, right? We're signaling it's business as usual, right? Everything's just fine. If we were upset, surely you would know it, we would stop the military aid. So this is a really important point. These are our dollars, and with our dollars comes our moral standing, and we should not compromise our moral standing. As Armenians, as Americans, we don't want our money being used to kill innocent people upon their indigenous homeland. Again, war crimes by Azerbaijan and Turkey must be thoroughly investigated and their leaders held accountable. We expect accountability. We don't think there should be exceptions to the law. Again, these are very basic propositions. These are things that I think, as I mentioned earlier, that young children would agree with. If someone does something wrong, they should answer for their wrongs. If they are not held accountable, they'll just keep doing it, maybe get worse. I think these are pretty basic things. I think any child, any adult, any parent, any sibling would understand that if you turn a blind eye to bad behavior, in fact, reward bad behavior, you're going to see more bad behavior. Accountability is the key. We can discuss this in terms of other priorities, right? We have many, many pressing needs here in the U.S. We hear discussion of our infrastructure, our healthcare system. There's a variety of needs, and there are a lot of Americans in difficult circumstances. Why, in light of all these needs here at home, are we shipping money abroad? And by the way, not just shipping it to some poor, disadvantaged country, shipping it to a very wealthy country, an oil-producing, a carbon polluting country run by a billionaire family that runs Azerbaijan like an ATM machine. We read recently in some revelations, I think the Pandora Papers, about the Aliyev family purchasing $740 million worth of real estate in London. London alone. Who knows what they bought in Paris or New York or Los Angeles or Berlin elsewhere or Hong Kong, I don't know. But 740 million just in London. Let's assume that that's a fraction of their real estate investment, and they have other real estate, and maybe they don't just invest in real estate, maybe they have some other investments. We're talking easily about billions and billions of dollars this one family owns, and that's the family that gets your tax dollars, right? So if you need to explain it to, let's say, an American colleague, a non-Armenian friend, you might say, you know what, I'm sure you work hard for your money. You might not be so happy to hear that some of your money is going to help this billionaire, kill Christian Armenians. That's another certainly an important way to think about it. The money that has gone to Azerbaijan did in fact do just that. The fact that before, during, and even after Azerbaijan's aggression, the money and the flow of U.S. military aid has continued, that President Biden green-lighted continued U.S. military aid, just emboldens Azerbaijan to be even more aggressive. These are essentially rewards. So we're rewarding very, very bad behavior. We're rewarding the recruitment of foreign mercenaries, jihadists. We're rewarding the deployment of white phosphorus and cluster bombs and other munitions. We're rewarding the deployment of Turkish drones, including the use of U.S. parts. All of these are being rewarded. We're sending a signal, sort of some one-off comments here and there aside. If people are paying attention to our actions, not just our words, they will see that our actions are to continue funding Azerbaijan in the light of ethnic cleansing, in the light of prohibited munitions, illegal mercenaries, the deployment of Turkish drones containing U.S. parts. This whole list, this whole bill of indictment of Azerbaijan is long, and it is met on the U.S. side with cover-ups and excuses and continued U.S. aid. There was yesterday, many of you saw, a killing, a cold-blooded murder of an Armenian in Artsakh who was simply repairing a water system so that people could get clean water, families could drink and wash and care for their homes and their crops. Young Armenian guy, 22-year-old, shot in cold blood by Azerbaijani forces, and the U.S. Department of State response was of the most anemic sort, of the weakest sort, using passive verbs. They regretted, I think the phrase was something like, we regret the violence that led to the death of an Armenian civilian. Anyone on this call who's been through 10th grade English knows that the use of the passive voice, clearly in this case intentional, is meant to downplay the action and to not give it agency, to say, it rained yesterday, or, the boy was hit in the head by the basketball, right? It doesn't say, Bob threw the ball at Jim's head, right? Instead, it's like Jim's head was hit by a basketball. Well, did the basketball just magically appear on Earth and then project itself toward the boy's head? Or isn't a sentence that a 10th grade teacher, English teacher, would mark as a good sentence? Wouldn't it include a subject, an object, and a predicate? Wouldn't it include the simple basic facts? If it's obvious that it was an Azerbaijani soldier, and it is obvious that an Azerbaijani soldier killed this Armenian civilian, then say so. The choice to not do so is a choice, and it is a cowardly choice. It is a craven choice. It is one that disrespects the young man who was killed and emboldens the killer who killed him. This is a disgrace. When we see it, we must call it out. We must call it out. If we're ever to turn the corner from this weak and cowardly policy of both sidism, right? We're going to do it by challenging it aggressively, time and time again. You can do that on social media, but the most effective way to do it is through Congress, and that's by encouraging your friends, your family, certainly you yourself, to get these amendments passed, to get the two Menendez amendments passed, to get the Padilla amendment passed, to have some accountability, to have some respect for the rule of law, to send a signal, a powerful signal, back to the U.S. foreign policy establishment that we will not abide, we will not endure, we will not suffer these offenses, these insults. We're entirely in the right to do so. The right is on our side, the facts are on our side, the morality is on our side, and if we step up and fight for our side, which is the truth, we'll see that we can prevail. And it will be good not just for Armenia, not just for the region, but I think for America and ultimately the world. The message we're sending right now undermines our commitment to human rights as a central pillar of American foreign policy. President Biden, Secretary Blinken came into office saying they were going to center human rights in our foreign policy. Well, the sad reality is our policy on Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the Caucasus has been exactly the opposite. What we have sent, sadly, and I say this with great regret, what we have sent sadly, is a signal to Azerbaijan and other authoritarian regimes that we can be silenced, we can be bought, and that's wrong. The message we need to send to the Aliyevs and Erdogans of the world is that America is a nation of laws. We are people who are deeply committed to humanitarian principles. We will not be bullied, we will not be bribed, we will not be blackmailed. That effort, my friends, starts today, and it starts with you. So please take action today at anca.org/NDAA. Thank you.